أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. We were discussing Surah Al Imran, verse number 28. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. The faithful should not take the faithless for allies instead of the faithful, and whoever does that, Allah will have nothing to do with him, except when you are wary of them out of caution. Allah warns you to beware of disobeying Him, and toward Allah is the return. Last week we discussed about the meaning of this wilaya of kafirun, taking kuffar as awliya, and we went into details about different types of it. There's another concept which is very important and mentioned in this verse, is that illa an tattaqu minhum tuqa. First of all, it says, whoever does that, whoever takes as their awliya the non-believers, disbelievers, then فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. لَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ means that they are not from awliya Allah. Allah is bari minhum. Bari means Allah disowns them. They are not part of the faithful anymore. Although they may confess faith, they may confess their shahadatain. However, because of this wilaya between kuffar that I explained last week, then that bond of faith that he has with other faithful people and also with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will break. That's the meaning of فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. Then Allah has put a caveat here. Unless if you fear a harm coming to you from them, then of course this is the position, this is the place for taqiyya. Illa an tattaqu minhum tuqa. Tattaqu means if you fear them, and tuqa is the maf'ul mutlaq, is an adverb, is an adverb for emphasis, that if you fear them, a reasonable fear that may somehow harm your life or harm your body or anything else, anything important, of course. Now, we need to delve a bit deep in this concept of taqiyya, because it has become a very controversial issue, and sometimes the Shias are accused of all the time practicing taqiyya, which is somehow dissimulating one's faith out of fear of harm or anything like that. Now, here, certainly taqiyya is something mentioned in the Quran. Here it says that if you fear from kuffar harm on your life, on your body, then it doesn't matter if you have wilaya on them, or if you confess something which is not in your heart, and they force you to do that. This is the meaning of taqiyya. Taqiyya is master, is an adverb, is an infinitive for ittaqa. For we have ittaqa, taqiyatan, wa taqwan, wa tuqatan, as we have here. These are all somehow infinitives or verbal nouns which are used here for taqwa, for ittaqa, for somehow protecting oneself out of fear. Now, in Tibyan, Sheikh Tusi gives a definition for taqiyya. It says that at-taqiyya إظهار باللسان خلاف ما ينطوي عليه القلب. to say something by your tongue, by your mouth, which is different from what is in your heart. So this is the meaning of taqiyya. You do not believe in something, but you say that you believe in it. You do not subscribe to a belief or faith, but you say, I subscribe to it. So, التقية الإظهار باللسان خلاف ما ينتوي عليه القلب. However, why? للخوف على النفس إذا كان ما. Okay, that's a different thing. للخوف على النفس. If you fear for your life, or something similar to that, you fear for your life or something similar to that, then that is the place for taqiyya. You say something that you do not believe in. However, this is the case إذا كان ما يبطنه هو الحق فإن كان ما يبطنه باطلا كان ذلك نفاقا. Of course, with the condition that if that belief which is in the heart and you conceal it and say something different is haqq, is something that you sincerely believe in, that is the truth. However, if there is something batil in your heart and you know that it is batil, but you pretend or present something different, then that is nifaq, that's hypocrisy. It is only when you conceal the haqq which is in your heart because you fear for your life or a considerable harm. Now, what are the sources for permissibility of taqiyya? Is this something that only Shias believe in? Or it is something which is rooted in the Quran, in the Sunnah, and in aql, intellect, and in ijma' of ulama of Islam? Now let's see. Let's go to the Quran first to see what do we have in the Quran. The Quran in Surah Al mentions something which is a reference to Ammar ibn Yasir, as all exegetes say. Because we know that the Yasir family were actually persecuted very harshly for their belief. And the Prophet, when they were tortured, used to pass by them, but he had no power to help them. Even once it is said that Yasir, the father of Ammar, said while he was lying there and the Prophet was passing, he said, "Ad-dahru hakadha ya Rasulallah." Is this the type of life, ya Rasulallah? Is this how the life goes? And Rasulullah told him, "Sabran ya Aba Yasir." Have patience. Your reward is paradise. Now, Ammar's parents were martyred. These were the first martyrs in Islam. However, for Ammar, who was a young chap, they tortured him to insult the prophets. And he did. He could not tolerate that torture. He did, and they let him go. He came to the Prophet with tears in his eyes, saying, "Ya Rasulallah halaktu," or kafartu. I have become a kafir. And the other ashab, there's ba'dul ashab, some of the companions said, "Kafar Ammar." Ammar has become a disbeliever by saying kalimatul kufr. فقال النبي كلا إن عمارا يغمره الإيمان من قرنه إلى قدم. Ammar is immersed in faith from top to toe, from his head to his feet. Is immersed in faith. When he came to the Prophet, when Ammar came to the Prophet, وَجَاءَ عَمَّارْ إِلَى النَّبِيِّ وَهُوَ يَبْكِي. Now the man, he was crying out of regret. Why did I say something out of force of urge of torture? فَمَسَحَ النَّبِيُّ عَيْنَيْهِ. the Prophet wiped his tears. وقال له لا تبكي إن عادوا لك فعد لهم بما قلت. Do not fear, do not cry. If they did the same thing again to you, you say the same thing again. It's permissible. And then this verse was revealed in, these two verses were revealed in Surah Al-Nahl. Man kafara billahi min ba'da imani. Someone who disbelieves after his faith. Illa. Now this is the important thing. Illa man ukriha. Except the one who is forced reluctantly وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ, while his heart is tranquil, he's fast with faith. The faith is there, the haqq is there, but he's forced to say something quite different. When I say man kafara billahi min ba'di imanih, I don't mean illa man ukraha wa qalbuhu bil iman. So I don't mean someone who has been forced to use taqiyya. What I mean by that, walakin man sharaha bil kufr sadra, the ones who have opened their heart for kufr. فَعَلَيْهِمْ غَضَبٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. And the reason for people to open their hearts for kufr is this: ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُ مُسْتَحَبُّ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ. Because they have chosen the life of this world over akhirah, so they tend to move away from faith to disbelief. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. So this is naturally something mentioned in the Quran about taqiyya. And also we have in Surah, apart from this Surah Al Imran, which mentions إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاتٍ. So these are two instances of taqiyya mentioned in the Quran. And the third is the case of Mu'min al Fir'aun. When he was concealing his faith, which was haqq, from Al Fir'aun for several years. وَقَالَ رَجُلٌ مُؤْمِنٌ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَكْتُمُ إِيمَانَهُ. He was concealing his faith. So it doesn't matter if one conceals their faith, because there is a fear for life, fear for severe harm. There is no problem for that. Now, this is about the Book of God. The Quran talks about taqiyya in this sense. Apart from taqiyya, apart from Book of God, we have permissibility of taqiyya in the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him. I don't want to, of course, delve into the reports from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, because that's very clear. They have emphasized the permissibility and sometimes the necessity of taqiyya. Now, Fakhruddin Razi in his Tafsir and Rashid Raza in Al-Minar and others, they have reported this. This hadith is reported in our books as well. It's reported in Tibyan of Sheikh Tusi, Majmu' al-Bayan of Tabrisi. It says that إن مسيلمة الكذاب أخذ رجلين من أصحاب رسول الله. Musaylamah al-Kadhab was someone who claimed prophethood after the Prophet. And of course, there was a big fight between Muslims and Musaylamah and his army, who were very strong. And eventually he was defeated. So two of the companions of the Prophet were arrested by him. فقال لأحدهما أتشهد أني رسول الله. Do you testify that I am messenger of God? He said yes. Well, if he said no, he would have killed him. فأطلقه, so he let him go. وقال للثاني, he said to the second one, أتشهد أني رسول الله. Do you testify that I am Rasulullah. He did not testify to that. He said no. And he killed him. Now this was at the time of the Prophet. Of course, he claimed at the time of the Prophet, and the big fight and battle happened after the Prophet, peace be upon him. وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ, when this news reached the Prophet, peace be upon him, قَالَ أَمَّا الْمَقْتُولُ فَمَضَى عَلَى يَقِينِهِ وَصِدْقِهِ فَهَنِيئًا. The one who was killed, he died at his yaqeen and certainty, on his honesty, and he's blessed with it. فَهَنِيئًا. وَأَمَّا الْآخَرُ, the second one, who practiced taqiyya. In his heart, of course, he did not believe that Musaylama was a messenger, but he said yes. أَمَّا الْآخَرُ فَقَبَلَ الرُّخْصَةَ فَلَا تَبِعَةَ عَلَيْهِ. He accepted the permissibility of taqiyya. This is the rukhsa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is permissible. You can use it. And there is no consequences on him. La tabada. Now, after mentioning this hadith, as I said, is in Tafsir al-Razi, Tafsir al-Minar, and many all other tafasir have mentioned this hadith about taqiyya under this verse. However, Sheikh Tusi, after mentioning this hadith, he says that فَعَلَى هَذَا التَّقِيَّ رُخْصَةٌ وَالْإِفْصَاحُ بِالْحَقِّ فَضِيلَةٌ. He says, according to this hadith, it means that taqiyya is permissible. However, explicitly mentioning the truth and bearing the consequences is a merit, fadila. Because what the Prophet says here is that the one who was killed, hani'an lah, is blessed. The other one, there's no consequences on him because he took the permissibility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that had provided for him. Now, what Sheikh Tusi says, this is different from our akhbar, from A'imma alayhimus salam. وَظَاهِرُ أَخْبَارنا يَدُلُّ عَلَىٰ أَنَّهَا وَاجِبَةٌ. Our akhbar says that this is wajib. وَخِلَافُهَا خَطَأٌ. And to choose the opposite option is a mistake. Anyhow, it is not, according to the intellect, one should not lose their lives just for nothing, just because some people would like to force them to say something in vain, because it's not in their heart. That's why our akhbar says that it is wajib. It's wajib to save your life from those silly people who try to force you to say something we should not believe in. And also, there are other narrations generally talking about harm, la dharara wa la dharara fil Islam, which is accepted by Shia and Sunni. There is no harm and no harming in Islam. Or رفع عن أمتي ما اضطروا إليه. There is no harm, there is no consequences on members of my ummah if they do something out of iztirar, out of urgency, out of something, for example, if they are forced to do it or something like that. So, based on the Book of God, based on the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Sunni and Shi'i scholars have consensus on permissibility of taqiyya, although some Shia ulama say that not only on its permissibility, but it's on obligatory nature at cases. Now here I have some fatwa of some of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah, from ulama of Hanafiya al-Jassas in Ahkam al-Quran, says that when he mentions إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَىٰ, يعني أن تخالفوا تلف النفس. You have to protect yourself against losing life or losing limbs, even if you have to show muwalat to them, show friendship, say things that they like to say, even if you do not believe in them. And in Tafsir al-Razi, again, Fakhruddin al-Razi mentions that reports from Hassan al-Basri, قال التقية جائزة إلى يوم القيامة. Taqiyya is permissible until the day of judgment. And from Ash-Shafi'i, it's reported that not only he allowed taqiyya, but he said that even if a Muslim fears from another Muslim, and this is something which happened in the history, isn't it? The Shias were protecting themselves against the Umayyads, Abbasids, those who, as soon as they found out that they had some affiliation with A'imma alayhimus salam or some beliefs which were specific to Shias, they were killed or maimed, imprisoned. So here Shafi'i says, إِذَا خَافَ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِ لما بينهما من الاختلاف فيما يعود إلى مسائل الدين. If in religious matters they have اختلاف, they have differences, and one fears that if they explicitly mention what they believe they are killed, then they can do taqiyya. We have the case, this in our contemporary time, we have the instance of Daesh. If, for example, one of those Daeshi members find you proclaiming that you are a Shia, they kill you instantly. So you have to protect yourself. You don't need to say that I'm Shia, or I believe in Imam, or I don't know, whatever. Now, there is a question here, which I think I implicitly answered that question, and that is, if this is something which is in the Book of God, something which is in the fatwa of ulama, in the sunnah of the Prophet, and Shia and Sunni ulama have consensus on its permissibility, why the Shia have been singled out for practice of taqiyya? Why is that so? Well, the reason is very clear. The reason is very clear. Because the Shias were persecuted over time. They were minority. The majority, especially the rulers, not very much the members of the community or even the ulama of Ahlul Sunnah, although some of them were very severe in that. However, because they were a minority who were persecuted, who were questioned about their faith most of the time, about their affiliations, they had to practice taqiyya. And this became something which people thought that this is something that only Shias believe in. That's not the case. I just remember a case about Ali al-Madini and many other Sunni ulama at the time of Ma'mun. Ali al-Madini is very, very great Sunni scholar. He was one of the mashayikh of Bukhari, and he's a great reporter. At the time of Ma'mun, he and other ulama who believed in the eternality of the Quran. They used to say that Quran is not created. Quran has been there with the eternity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the time of Ma'mun, of course, he was forced in a way, because these people used to say that whoever believes in createdness of the Quran is kafir. And because many Mu'tazilis were in the court of Ma'mun, they were offended by this very much. Especially at the time they accused the chief wazir of Ma'mun to be a kafir because he believed in createdness of the Quran. So he took an action, a severe action. So both sides were wrong, of course. Somehow doing takfir on each other. If you believe in createdness of the Quran, you are kafir, or if you believe in eternality of the Quran, you are kafir. Both sides were wrong. But of course, they instigated Ma'mun to take action. And so he took many of the scholars, senior scholars like Ali al-Madini. At that time, Ahmad ibn Hanbal was a junior scholar. He was arrested as well. And Ali al-Madini and many others, they confessed against their faith that yes, we believe that Quran is created. And they were released. And when they came out of Ma'mun's prison, their followers, other ulama, condemned them. Why did you confess that? You do not believe it. And Ali al-Madini very explicitly said, well, I practiced taqiyya. It was taqiyya because I feared for my life. So it was something which was used in such instances, in such situations. And of course, in our time, I think we are seeing examples of that in many communities, in many areas. Now, in Majma' al-Bayan, after mentioning all these about taqiyya, he says that, of course, in taqiyya, you are not allowed to do certain things which goes beyond protecting your life and endanger lives of others. For example, if a Daesh catch you and say that, are you Shia? You say no. They say, okay, kill this Shia person. You cannot do that. This is not a situation for taqiyya anymore. Or if, for example, by taqiyya you believe, you may know that great harm would come to deen and religion. That's not the position of taqiyya anymore. This is what the author of Majma' al-Bayan, Sheikh Tabrisi, says. Then he reports something from Al-Mufid rahmatullah alayh. He says that قال المفيد إنها قد تجب أحيانا وتكون فرضا. Sometimes taqiyya is wajib. ويجوز أحيانا من غير وجوب. And sometimes it's permissible. It's not wajib, it's permissible. وتكون في وقت أفضل من تركها وقد يكون تركها أفضل. وتكون في وقت أفضل من تركها. And sometimes it is better to do it, not to do it, better to do it, not doing it, and sometimes abandoning it and not doing it is better. And وإن كان فاعلها معذورا ومعفوا عنه. Although, in all these cases, the one who practices taqiyya is forgiven. So, to sum up, the verse says that لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء. The mu'minun will not take the kafirin as allies, and whoever does that, Allah disowns them, as there is no relation of faith, except in cases where you fear them and consider, because tuqat is an adverb for emphasis. تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاتًا. If there is a considerable harm which is at sight, then you can, of course, you can break this law. وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. And Allah is admonishing you to be wary of Him. Now, nafsuhu, we know that Allah doesn't have nafs or body, or nafs here doesn't mean soul, it means His own person. As it is mentioned in Majma' al-Bayan, أي ذاته يحذركم الله, ذاته Himself. Allah is advising you to be wary of Him, as we have in translation, and Allah warns you to be aware of what? Now, يحذركم الله نفسه, maybe Allah is warning you to be wary of him. Now, him here may mean his punishment or his disobedience in these matters. So this is what we have to be wary of. وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. It means وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ إِيَّاهُ. Like إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. Because يُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ who is very difficult. يُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ إِيَّاهُ. However, to emphasize, instead of إِيَّاهُ, it says يُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. But beware, this is not like nafsul insan. It's just like himself. And he will, of course, reprimand, he will give reward or punishment to anyone appropriate to their actions. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. And the return is to Allah, and He will certainly give every soul what they deserve. وَتُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا عَمِلَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Thank you. Let's begin with the first question that's come in the Zoom chat. Why do you think the Sunnis that have and feel it is obligatory to obey their rulers, is this their understanding of what taqiyya is?
Well, I don't think that is very much related to taqiyya. It is a different matter, because they interpret the verse Ati'ullah wa Ati'ur Rasul wa ulul amr minkum. They interpret the ulul amr to be the rulers, and therefore, of course, it's not the view of all Sunni scholars, but many Sunni scholars believe that, and that is very different from the ruling of taqiyya. In the case of taqiyya, of course, from legal point of view, they all believe that taqiyya is permissible, and at some points it is obligatory.
Thank you very much. If anyone does have any questions, please do post them in the chat, either on Zoom or YouTube, or feel free to unmute your mic and ask Sheikh directly. Sheikh, so if I can ask the next question. Sometimes we hear the hadith mentioned that from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, taqiyya is my religion and the religion of my ancestors. So firstly, is this hadith authentic? And if it is authentic, what's the meaning of this?
Well, of course, I mean, that is what we said. It's what the Quran is talking about. And why Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam is emphasizing that is because some people were criticizing Shias for performing taqiyya. And that's why Imam Sadiq had to emphasize that taqiyya is my religion, the religion of my fathers, it's the religion of the Quran, it's the religion revealed by God. And anyone who criticizes some people for practicing it, because it was a very dangerous time. And even Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq could not reveal the name of his successor freely, because there was the fear that he would have been killed. So in such a situation, of course, taqiyya would find prominence. It was very different from the time that we are living in. it finds prominence. And because some Sunnis were criticizing, and even some Shias were thinking that we don't like to perform taqiyya, we want to be open, we want to go and fight and things like that. Therefore, Imam has emphasized that at-taqiyya to dini wa dina abai.
Thank you very much. The general Sunni view more recently seems to have changed slightly. So they tend to say that taqiyya is okay against non-Muslims, but only not acceptable against Muslims themselves. Where has this kind of understanding come from?
Well, these are just self-made ideas. I mean, taqiyya is something which is quite logical in the face of danger, whether it comes from a Muslim or from a non-Muslim. I mean, these days you feel, not only Shias, many Sunnis as well, feel more endangered by people like Daesh than, for example, by non-Muslims. So it doesn't make any difference whether this danger comes from a Muslim side or from a non-Muslim side. It is something logical, and the Quran has actually mentioned it generally. إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرَهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Someone who is reluctantly forced while his heart is tranquil with faith. So this doesn't actually differentiate between Muslim and non-Muslim.
Thank you very much. Another question we've received, so moving away from the topic of taqiyya, the verse that we were discussing, verse 28, ends with وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. What is this return? Is this just going to heaven, or is this something more than going to heaven?
Well, Masir is different from Marja, because in the Quran we have إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ, you return to him, and we have إِلَيْهِ الْمَصِيرُ. Masir is the path that we will traverse in our life. It's different from returning that we discussed before. What's the meaning of returning to God? But here it says that because Allah has created everything, has expanded it, and then it is all going back towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The world of angels, the world of human beings, the material world is going to go a higher grade of creation, a higher grade of existence. And certainly that is a sort of process of going closer and closer to the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean that it's only paradise. No, Masir is for everyone. It's for human beings in general, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, whether believer or non-believer. It's not only for human beings, it's for angels as well. As we have about the angels, which is said that they will go back to their Lord in a day, which in your counting is like 50,000 years. So everything is going up towards Allah. Actually, the philosophers talk about two semicircles, a semicircle of nuzul, that's also nuzul, where Allah has created things to develop, and this developing is, in a sense, expansion in creation. And then there's also su'ud, the semicircle of ascension. So descension and ascension, and this ascension is going back towards Allah. It's very different from going back to the previous states. It's not going back to our previous state. After this expansion, after this process of coming to creation and going back, we go to a place where we have developed, where we have grown, where we have found perfection. And this is the meaning of going back to Allah, or Masir. The trajectory is towards Allah.
Thank you for that detailed answer. We have another question. When do you think taqiyya stops and the time to declare facts though when harm can happen, but managed?
Well, we cannot actually mention a time for this. I mean, even say, for example, at the time of Imam al-Asr alayhi salam, if a believer is caught in a situation where, of course, the earth is not yet completely become submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even at that time, we may have to practice taqiyya. Sometimes we mistake in the situation of taqiyya, and we perform taqiyya where taqiyya is not necessary or where taqiyya is not permissible. We have to be, as Sheikh Mufid had mentioned, sometimes it's wajib, sometimes it's permissible, sometimes it's better to do, sometimes it's better not to do. So I think it is left to every individual to decide about that. And we have to bear in mind as well that as I mentioned, I think that was by one of the Mufassirun or Sheikh Mufid, I don't remember now, that it is when you are concealing truth in your heart, because you will be endangered because of truth. But if it's for nifaq, if it's for hypocrisy, if it's for personal gain, that is not permissible, certainly.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you very much, Sheikh.
Maybe people are doing taqiyya to ask, huh?
And we hope that is for the right reason.
Very good. Very good. Okay, inshallah, see you next week.
No, thank you so much, Sheikh. Inshallah, we will see you next week.